Welcome to Mastered by Porch Music, where we pull back the curtain on the music industry to reveal the stories and insights of those who make it all happen. I'm Logan, and today we're diving into the world of vocal mastery with Amanda Kind. Amanda is a vocal coach who can do almost anything with her voice, and she's here to share the importance of maintaining vocal health and to get your voice to do what you need it to. Before we jump in, if you found value in this series so far, I'd love it if you took the time to give us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It helps a lot. Now let's get into our episode with Amanda Kind. We're here with Amanda Kind, voice coach, artist. Thanks for joining us, Amanda.
Thanks for having me, Logan. I'm looking forward to chatting about things.
So you are a vocal coach. I mean, a lot of people, especially in the Ontario scene here, know about you. But why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, how you got started into vocal coaching and how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, thanks for asking. My road was very windy. I started out loving music as a kid. My mom was a real music lover and listened to everything from like Garth Brooks to Enya and like Barbra Streisand and the Oak Ridge Boys and Shania Twain, like everything you can think of. So we were a very musical family. My mom played piano and most of my uncles on her side play guitar. And so harmony was sort of a thing for us growing up. And when I went in to start learning about music in a more formal setting, for me, voice lessons were available only in the classical realm. So if you were going to take voice lessons, they were going to be, studying Mozart or Handel or things like that. So I began in the classical world. And so when I went and in all through like my high school years, I was obsessed with like Green Day and all the grunge punk stuff and like Gwen Stefani and No Doubt. So I was singing like Mariah Carey riffs and Dolly Parton songs and punk in my everyday life. And then I was studying classical music. And I really wanted to study the stuff I was listening to, but it just wasn't an avenue for that.
Did you love the classical stuff too?
You know what? I really did enjoy it for what it was. I wouldn't say it's my first passion. I would say I'm glad I did it. It helps me have facility in another area and it helps me understand a different style of music. I think, my company is called Vocal Versatility, and part of that is because we're looking at being able to do many things with your voice, including making classical type sounds. So for me, I went off to university to a small college in British Columbia, because that's where I'm from. I'm from BC, so I grew up in White Rock, British Columbia, and I studied classical and jazz for the first 2 years. But my heart was not in it. I really wanted to study like pop, rock, musical theater. And so I did something that I look back now and I can't believe I did, but I quit school, got an internship on Broadway and moved to New York moved to New York and worked at a company like as an assistant for 12 months. Cool. And it was really awesome. I got to work on the producers when it was in development and Hairspray development. So it was really cool. I got to learn from lots of Broadway people and see a ton of shows and do a lot of singing in that realm. And I moved home with that experience and then ended up going to a school called the Canadian College of Performing Arts. And it was a really boutique school, very small, so lots of student to teacher time. And it was there that I really began to develop my voice in a more commercial sort of way. And we didn't even use that language then. It was just like, can you belt or can you not belt? Right? It was so basic. So I went to school there, and it was even there that I began to start helping other students with sounds. And I've always been a kind of repertoire nerd, so I listen to a lot of music in every style. And I think that helps as a voice coach if you're understanding what songs are out there. Like even now that I'm a little more focused into country, I'm constantly listening to what's on the radio, what's on the Billboard chart right now. What are the sounds that are being made by those artists? And eventually I moved to Waterloo here in Ontario, and I finished my degree at the University of Waterloo because at the time they had the #1 cultural management program in the country. And I was looking at being like an arts administrator, maybe in addition to being an artist. So I finished my degree up here, and I was taking voice lessons with a really well-renowned voice coach. His name is Fred Love. And
What a great last name.
what a great last name.
Oh my
Amazing
God,
guy.
Love and Kind.
Love and Kind,
That's
yeah.
so great.
And he ended up getting a job in the US at a major university, and he handed me his studio.
Wow.
So when he left, he trained me how to teach more, and then he basically moved out of town and gave me a bunch of students.
Wow.
And I was at that time pretty young, like 26 maybe. And from there, it began to grow, and I was teaching kind of all ages, everything from teenagers looking to develop their voices to recreational adults.
Mhm.
And then as time passed, some of the students that I had taught as kids became professionals. And as those professionals went out into the world, they were recommending their friends to me. And then before I knew it, I was teaching mostly professionals.
Wow.
So it's really great, like organic trajectory. And for those who don't know, I operate and I'm the artistic director for one of the biggest pop choir organizations in Canada called Pop Nation. And so that organization has many staff and multiple groups. There's about 400 people in the mix on that. And so I'm lucky to have staff members who also teach the way that I do. And so part of my job is to oversee the pedagogy of that. So how we teach people to sing pop. And I am lucky now in my life to be able to teach. I teach at Laurier, and I did some teaching at Sheridan College and at the University of Guelph, and also be involved at Pop Nation and also have this private voice studio. So I feel blessed that part of my journey is that I have experience with many different types of singers and many different types of learning styles. And so, yeah, I was just saying to you before we formally started recording, like, I feel really blessed these days with many different types of opportunities. It's like I pinch myself pretty regularly.
I mean, it's fun to like watch you from the from my point of view, because I see that you have your hand in so many different things, and you have one of the greatest voices I've heard.
That's the kind thing to say.
To know that you're like passing on your knowledge and your expertise to other people is really, really cool.
Thank you for saying that. I'm so appreciative. I think one of the things that is a key takeaway for me is the idea of interrogating perfectionism. So many people don't know this because I really entered the country scene like just a couple of years ago, but I spent about 6 years not singing in public at all. And part of that was that I went through a period of complete stage fright. And it's hard when you're the teacher and the person who's coaching other people. All of a sudden you start to get in your head and go, I guess when I get up on stage, it better be perfect. It better be immaculate, because otherwise people are going to go, that's the teacher? Are you kidding me? And that fear eventually got to me so deeply that I couldn't get out on stage anymore without completely shaking. And it's important for me to talk about it because so many of the artists that I work with are experience various forms of stage fright. And part of the work that I'm doing with them, including developing their voice, is working through the fear. Like it's okay to be afraid and do it anyway. It's also okay to, not, to learn from doing. We have to learn by doing. We have to go out there and do it. And that's part of the reason why a lot of the business professionals say things like, it's important not to play too big of a stage too soon. We need to get our sea legs performing in front of 30 people, and then 50 people, and then 100 people before we start performing to 1,000 people, right? We need that experience. No amount of anything else can replace experience.
100%.
So you can be in a private voice studio with a teacher, and it is not the same as being out there with a drum set behind you and in-ears and all these other different sensory changes. So learning to build what you're doing and being happy with building in small increments is a huge part of the work that I do.
That's some great advice there. When does someone know that they need a vocal coach?
Well, I would argue that everybody needs a coach. It's
That's
just
what I was
that
getting at.
I would just argue that it's in varying degrees. So if somebody is experiencing things with their voice that they'd like to change, that getting in touch with a voice coach and having some sessions that are very close together is probably a great idea. So for example, if someone comes to me and says, I'm touring and I'm finding my voice pretty exhausted, or I'm recording and I'm just building the sounds that I want, I might say to them, you probably need to see a voice coach every 2 weeks or every week for a 3-month period at minimum. If your voice is feeling good and you feel like you understand it and have the right tools to help yourself, you might only need to see a voice coach once a month or once every few months. I have a bunch of clients that are on what I would call a maintenance plan. So they see me once a month, like somebody like a Corey from Lemon Cash. So I teach Corey from Lemon Cash. Great voice.
He has a great voice.
Exceptional voice. And somebody who is very serious about their vocal health. I have taught a lot of artists, and he's in the top 2% of people that really care about their instrument being great. And so I see him once every 2 months, once a month, depending on what it is. And we're just working through maintenance things. Or he might say to me, I'd like to cover this song, and this one note is causing me trouble. And so we might troubleshoot that section of the song for a bit, and I might give him directives to try different things. So that it depends on what you're doing and where you're at and how many variables are in the mix. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. How important is for someone to maintain their vocal health?
I think it's really important. I also think people can overdo it. Like, do I think people need a major warm-up before every performance? Not necessarily. I think every voice is unique and every body is unique, and people should try out different warm-ups and see what works for them. I need about 5 or 7 minutes to get my voice prepped for a performance that's about an hour. If I'm going to do longer than an hour, I usually warm up just a little bit longer than that. But I think people would be surprised at what those warm-ups are. So for me, it might be a bunch of lip trills. So that's where you blow air through your lips and do this funny thing, that thing, which is called an SOVT exercise. So semi-occluded vocal tract. Your mouth is partially closed. And I might do some head voice type things that like sound operatic, because for me, that feels very comfortable. But often on the way to a gig, I'm in the car and I will play a song that I'm going to sing, but I'll lip trill through the whole thing. So Any Man of Mine, but on a lip trill, like, which is ridiculous.
That should be how you record it, actually.
Oh yeah, like hilarious.
Yeah.
But that is
what does that do? What does that lip trill do?
Well, it's helping your folds vibrate, and there's less pressure exerted on them, because some of the air that would be coming out of your mouth is going back down your trachea. So there's something called the Bernoulli effect. And so for example, when we fly a plane and the pressure changes under the wings and the plane lifts off, there's something similar happening in the voice. So lip trills are really great. Humming is really great. It's also an SOVT exercise. People can do tongue trills, so that thing. They can also I like to do raspberries, which is like where you stick your tongue between your lips and go that thing, which people laugh
at. That's just fun. Why wouldn't someone want to warm up? Come on.
Right. Well, and like a lot of people experience things with their tongue where it doesn't behave the way that they would want it to. So sometimes the tongue likes to engage in singing in an unhelpful way. And so stretching it out or doing exercises that help to loosen it can be helpful for what we're doing, particularly if we're belting high notes or just, needing to get that tongue out of the way in certain places in songs. But again, like there's no one prescriptive model for each person. I have some set exercises that I often use, but each person is doing different things. So if you are a rock artist and you're doing grittier singing, I'm definitely going to use different exercises with that person than someone who's I have a lot of musical theater clients, than someone who's in musical theater and who's preparing to sing a Hairspray, or I have a client right now in Greece, like very different exercises depending on what the tonal outcome is of what they're doing.
What are some of the dangers of not preparing your voice? Like you said, some people can go on stage without doing too much vocal warm-up. Some people need more. One, I guess, how do you know when you've hit that point where you're warmed up enough? And
What happens if you don't warm up enough?
Well, I think you're going to know because it's going to feel tight or painful, or it'll feel like swollen in some way. It's just not going to feel comfy. I think what we're often looking for is the most efficient way to sing while you're feeling good about it. Like when we're talking about doing in musical theater 8 shows a week, well, that requires a specific amount of stamina, right? Touring, where you're on a bus and sleeping and then getting up and doing the next show, well, that also requires stamina. So if you're out there and you're losing your voice after, 20 minutes in a set, or you're doing 4 shows out of the 8 shows and then your body isn't responding the same way, there are things that need to be analyzed in order to make some changes. And that isn't necessarily related to warm up alone. It could be related to the amount of force you're sending. So a lot of times I talk with my clients about how they're over singing. So in commercial music, we're all using microphones. So if you're in musical theater, the microphone's either here or here, or you've got a microphone in your hand. And the microphone's job is to do at least 20% of the work. So if you're sending 100% force through the microphone, you're not really allowing the microphone to do its job to amplify your voice. And maybe you're sending so much force that you're exhausting your system.
Mm.
And so it seems counterintuitive, but sometimes we're just pushing too hard. And it's much easier to get the same sound. You can get the exact same sound with less force. So that could be that you're practicing without a microphone. And so you're used to pushing really, really hard. And once you get a microphone in front of you, you're not adjusting. So for my students, I'm making sure that as often as possible, they are rehearsing with amplification so they know exactly what it sounds like to have that feedback coming back to them.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It makes total sense. Like, I grew up in musical theater, but when I was in it, when I first started, it was like there were no microphones, so you had to go as loud as you possibly could. But and then when we grew up and got microphones, everyone had trouble being like, "Shut up, stop going so loud."
Right. Well, and frankly, we've now learned in the voice world that pushing voices to their max without amplification can be dangerous. And these styles, it was like operatic styles and early musical theater styles, well, they were intended not to be amplified. Part of that was the way that the rooms were created and just the type of singing that people are doing. But now that we're singing more like we speak, because commercial music is so much more closely aligned with how we speak, that doesn't have the same, in many cases, acoustic carrying power. If I'm going to sing low range verse stuff, like a Chris Stapleton, for example, type of sound, well, that probably needs some amplification in order for all the detail in the voice to be heard. If he was trying to project over a whole big audience, it would probably put a lot of pressure on his voice.
So if someone is feeling that pain or that discomfort when they're singing, while they're singing, and they're in the middle of a show and they can't stop or something, what's like some advice that they can do to ease that discomfort?
Great question. There's no one-size-fits-all answer, but the first thing I would do would be to send less force and increase the diction, which means the clarity of the words. So if you increase the clarity of the words, sometimes that can sound like a louder sound when it actually isn't. So I would say get slightly quieter. Ask them to turn up the mic to compensate, or hopefully they will, or increase the clarity of your words to see if you can get that to compensate for the sound. But as much as possible, we're looking to avoid that feeling of being stuck or inflamed. And I would also say that if you're feeling that consistently, seeing not only a voice coach, but potentially someone like an ENT or an SLP, so that's like an ear, nose, and throat specialist, or in my case, mostly a voice specialist. In Ontario, we have the Voice Clinic in Toronto. And for those who don't follow him, but Aaron Lowe works there, who's a specialist, a voice specialist, and he's on Instagram, and he does something called laryngeal massage, and I'm going to be there tomorrow getting one in Toronto, and that helps to release a lot of tension in the muscles. So if you're someone who's singing actively all the time, not only are you warming up and potentially cooling down, but some of the maintenance on your voice might actually also be going to see a specialist to help loosen up the muscles and make sure that they're as flexible and free as possible. And we're lucky to have a clinic like that available to us here, in Ontario. He's somebody, if you look on his Instagram, he's working with everybody from indie artists and musical theater people to Sting and Michael Bublé and Shawn Mendes and all those, major touring acts.
And what was that called? The Toronto Voice?
It's called the Voice Clinic in Toronto.
The Voice Clinic. Cool.
Yeah.
What are some misconceptions about vocal coaching that we know, like an artist is like, I don't need it, or like what are some misconceptions that you've heard?
I think I've heard that people are afraid that vocal coaching will change your voice, like it will change the signature sound of your voice. And I'm not going to say that those fears are unfounded. They might be founded with the wrong coach. So in our current life and times in vocal coaching, we have shifted away from this idea that the teacher is the master and that the person they're working with is the student and that the teacher knows everything and that the student should just be quiet and do what they're told. This is not a thing. It's not really a thing in teaching in general anymore.
Yeah.
Anytime I work with an artist, it's collaborative, and the artist themselves is telling me what they want to sound like. And I ask them questions about how they're feeling, and I offer them choices, and I say, if you want to sound like this, here are some exercises that might help you with that. If you want to sound like this, here are some exercises that might help you with that. Let's try both, and you make a decision. So, in my opinion, the artists should never work with anybody who tells them that their sound has to change if the artist doesn't want that. You are in charge of your sound. And if your signature sound is super raspy and whiny and a very unique sound, well, then part of the coach's job is to retain that uniqueness and still help you work on things, right? Because all those unique voices, like Britney Spears is a unique voice. If someone heard her voice and tried to change it because they had a very specific idea of how she's supposed to sound, that would be taking away the uniqueness of her as an artist. So unless she wants to change her sound, we should be doing our level best to help her retain what makes her special.
That sounds like totally logical to me.
Yeah, it falls in line with lots of shifts in the world, which is that we're broadening our scope of what artists look and sound like, and we're broadening our scope about what is and is not commercially viable, right? The audience dictates what is commercially viable. So we could sit there, I could listen to an artist's songs and say, I don't get this. It's not my taste. And then we might look and say, well, there's 3 million followers on TikTok. Well, there's an audience there. So who am I to say that sound is not viable? I have no agency in that world. My entire job is to nurture the needs of the artist in relation to their voice.
That makes sense. Like I always say about everything, there's space for everybody. So there's a sound for everybody. There's an audience for everyone. So just before we go here, if someone can only see it, like if someone came to see you once, what would a typical first visit look like with a vocal coach or with Amanda?
For me, it's going to look like asking you why you're here and what you want your sound to be like. What do you want to work on? A lot of times I see people one time if they're looking for like a warm-up routine that they want me to put in place. So in that case, I have some tracks that are pre-recorded. I have like maybe 60 or 70 of them, and I might pick 8 to 12 of them and say, let's try these out, and say, if you were going to do these before the show, go away and try to do these before every performance and tell me if they work for you. And oftentimes artists will come back to me and say, these 4 are the ones that make me feel great. I say, okay, great, leave the rest. Those 12 minutes of warm up seem to be working for you. And then I might see them in the future if they're working on a specific thing, or I might put a plan in place with them and say, let's work together on building that sound. And then there's the rare occasion when someone comes to me and says, I'm having a vocal issue. It's something is not feeling right all the time. And then I would refer out. And I think this is important to note. My job as a voice teacher is limited to coaching specific tonal outcomes. I am not a medical provider, which means my job is to refer to the voice clinic or to refer to another ENT. I don't have the medical knowledge. I may hear something and think there might be an issue, but I cannot diagnose.
No, of course.
So my role is to kind of listen and say, okay, I think you should go and make an appointment and to have a scope and have them look at it. And just to shout out to having a scope, I think everyone should have their voice scoped if they're a pro singer. You know, I'm a big believer in knowing what your instrument looks and feels like, and having people around you to help your instrument stay flexible and healthy and feeling good is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of smart strategy.
I always think it's interesting when people who aren't necessarily in the music industry are like, did you know this major artist has a vocal coach? They obviously they must suck.
And I'll tell you, I'm forgetting his name. I think it's Robert Stevenson. I'm going to look him up on Instagram right now, and I'm going to read you his client list, and then you can tell me whether or not big artists have vocal coaches. So Robert Stevenson's client list includes Justin Timberlake, Rihanna, Pharrell, Dave Matthews Band, Brandy Carlisle, One Republic, Chris Stapleton, SZA, Kane Brown, Hozier. If you
they must all suck.
I mean, those are pretty amazing artists, and they all work with somebody. So I think it's a smart thing to and you have to find the right fit. So I will not be the right fit for everybody. You know, there are tons of great vocal coaches across the country, all over the world. I work with people in many countries remotely. This is the beauty of Zoom, you know. So I think it's important to meet with someone once and feel like there's a connection there, because there's a lot of trust in working with someone's voice. So and people have different specialties, right? Like, I do not know everything. Most voice coaches don't know everything. We are constantly learning as well. So it's important for you to feel like you can really trust that person.
That sounds like a great place to leave it off.
Sounds good to me.
So if someone wants to reach out and, talk to you, get some advice, book a session, where can people find you?
Well, they can email me. I'm Amanda@vocalversatility.com.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Amanda. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
This is Mastered by Front Porch Music. Join Logan Miller and Jenna Weishar, the hosts of CCMA-nominated On the Porch with Front Porch Music, for this mini-series podcast offering crash courses on the ins and outs of the music industry. Expert guests from across the Canadian music landscape sit down with Jenna and Logan to discuss labels, getting your shows booked, landing festival slots, A&R, social media, and so much more. Mastered by Front Porch Music is produced by Logan Miller, Jenna Weishar, and Jason Saunders. The theme song for this podcast was written, produced, and performed by Keith Hunt.